Hey everybody, so I know that 2023 has just started, but that doesn't mean that I'm not thinking about all of the amazing books that I read in 2022. So today I am here to share with you a list of books that I read last year, I absolutely loved, and I don't think enough people were talking about. So I need to make sure they've made it onto your TBR. So let's get started. Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. It's Russell with Ink and Paper Blog. How are you doing today? As always, I hope you're happy, I hope you're healthy, I hope you're safe, and of course I hope you're reading an amazing book or two or three or four. It is still wet and rainy here in Northern California. I think it is going to continue that way for quite some time, so I might as well just get used to it. If you are dealing with any of the flooding or all of that, I hope you're safe and I hope that everything is coming to a close on this. I know it's been really terrible. If you are dealing with any weather issues across the entire world, I'm sending you good and positive thoughts. Today I'm here to talk about a stack of books that I read last year that I absolutely adored, and that I didn't hear that many people talk about, which makes me sad, which makes me think I need to do this video so I can get these books on more people's TBRs. So, without further ado, get out your pen, get out your paper, get out your Goodreads, however you keep track of your TBR. If you are so able, please order these books from your local independent bookstore or your library. If your library is where you go, get them to get you a copy as soon as possible. All these books are out. They all came out last year, so you should be able to get your hands on them as soon as possible. The first book that I want to tell you about is Honor by Thrity Umrigar, and this is out from Algonquin. It came out at the very, very beginning of 2022. And I loved this book. I will say it's a bit dark, and it will definitely weigh very hard on your heart at times, but it's fantastic. So it's the story of two women. One is a journalist, an Indian woman that has left India when she was very young, and she travels the world as a journalist. And she hasn't really come back to India since she and her family left. And she's asked back because a friend of hers who is a journalist has been injured, and she thinks she's coming back in order to take care of her friend through her injury. But what her friend really wants her to do is to finish a story that she's writing about a woman who is in the process of a lawsuit against her brothers. And we find out that she was in a relationship, I believe, I gotta make sure, she is Hindu and he was Muslim, and they were married, and the animosity between these two religious groups finally came to a head, and someone set their house on fire, killing her husband and injuring her. Now, she was pregnant at the time. She didn't know, but she wound up having a child afterwards, and she has decided to sue her brothers, who are the culprits. I'm not giving anything away. This is all found very early in the book. And what happens is that our main character, the journalist, starts to sort of dive into the story of this woman and learn about what she's had to go through, she and her husband had to go through. And then we learn her history and what her history is with India and her family's history. And as all that comes together, there's a lot. And you learn a lot about the religious battle between the Hindu religion and Muslim religion in India, and the corporate system and the legal system, which needs work. That's like a very, that is not even enough of a statement. Yeah, and it is so good. You learn a lot, but you're really drawn into the life of these characters and things, and you just want good things for everybody. And it's a tough read. I'm definitely putting it out there, but I thought it was beautifully written. The characters are fantastic, and I really, really loved it. So that's Honor by Thrity Umrigar, out from Algonquin Books here in the United States. Okay, you all know that I am a huge fan of a book about an author, or like a reimagining of an author's life. So I absolutely love The Last Confessions of Sylvia P. by Kravetz. This came out, I think, in February. March, February, from Harper Books. And this is a fantastically clever reimagining of the life and creation of The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, told in 3 separate sections. One is told from the point of view of a person who works in sort of a, what are those, auction house, that's the word I'm looking for, and she's been brought a piece of work that looks like it is the handwritten original version of the bell jar, and she's trying to authenticate it before it goes up for auction. The next section is told from the point of view of a poet who is sort of like a peer and I want to say antagonist, but that's like not the right word. But her and Sylvia sort of compete against each other in this world of words. She's a poet, Sylvia's a poet. They're in sort of the same literary circles, and you find out how this woman has sort of been involved in Sylvia's life. And then the third section is told from the point of view of a therapist who worked in a mental health facility that Sylvia was in. And what happens is all three of these pieces of the puzzle sort of come together all around the creation of the bell jar. I thought it was clever. I thought it was really well written. I thought all of the sections were entertaining and stood alone. So like no one section was weaker than the other for me. And when they all came together, it was a real it was a wow moment that Lee Kravetz was able to get all of those strings to tie into such a pretty bow. I really, really enjoyed it. Sylvia Plath is such an interesting woman, and everything that she went through that became sort of her art is just fascinating. So I really loved The Last Confessions of Sylvia P. by Lee Kravetz, and again, out from Harper Books. Okay, I raved about this book when I read it, and I just don't know that anyone talked about it, and that made me so sad. And that's We Do What We Do in the Dark by Michelle Hart. This is out from Riverhead Books. This is a coming of age tale. So basically we start with a woman, she's just starting college. Her mother has recently passed away, and she's left her father, and she's in school sort of trying to find herself. And she winds up at the gym one day seeing from behind this woman that she becomes enamored with, that we later learn is a professor in like the children literature department. And they wind up and go on to have an affair. The professor is married. Her husband, I think, is on sabbatical or teaching at another school or something. And so they have this love affair, but it's much more than that. It is almost like it sort of intrinsically becomes part of the young woman and who she winds up being. And we get sort of the comings and goings of this relationship through years in this woman's life. And we sort of get to see how this relationship formed all of the future of the main character. I'm sorry, Mallory is her name. Mallory is the student's name. I thought it was beautifully written. It's just one of those books that did something new with an idea that I feel we've all heard about, right? That student-teacher relationship. But this elevated it to a completely new and complicated and sophisticated way. And the writing is just so good. So that's We Do What We Do in the Dark by Michelle Hart, and this is out from Riverhead. Okay, and then there's this charming book that I read. You know, every once in a while you just need a read that just makes you feel good. And this was this book. When I read it at the time, it was just perfect. And that is The Secret Life of Albert Entwistle by Matt Cain. Congratulations to Matt. He and his husband just recently got married. This is out from Kensington Fiction. This is the story of Albert, obviously. Albert has been a mail carrier for decades and decades. And he's about to approach, I think it's his 65th birthday, and there's sort of a mandatory retirement. And he doesn't know what he's going to do because he's always been a mail carrier. He doesn't really have friends. He has his cat, and he has his life as a mail carrier. We learn through the story that Albert has had, when he was younger, had a love affair with a boy his own age, and it didn't end well. And what happens is that he has sort of closeted himself off from sort of any romance for the rest of his life. And he decides he's going to change that. He's going to find this boy, who is obviously now a man, and he's going to see what could have happened. And as he does that, as he makes that choice to become more authentically himself, he meets a ton of characters. One is a young woman, single mother, who's trying to figure out what she wants to do. And he sort of comes out, and all of the magic of being accepted for who you are. I will say I put this book down for a good couple of days because there is some, it's animal sadness is what I'm going to call it. And it made me bawl my eyes out. But in the end, this book is heartwarming and charming. And it's just an inspiration that it's never too late to make changes that will make you happy. And that's The Secret Life of Albert Entwistle by Matt Cain, out from Kensington Books. Okay. Now, this, I hesitate to say that not enough people talked about this book, but I think more people talked about the first book from this author, and I thought the second book was just as brilliant. So this is Bloomsbury Girls by Natalie Jenner. This is the follow-up to the Jane Austen Society, which I read a couple of years ago and absolutely loved it. Natalie Jenner actually attended my book club and spoke to us about the Jane Austen Society, and she is just a lovely, charming, thoughtful, just a great, amazing person. So her second book I was so excited for, and it did not let me down. The story of three women who work in a bookstore for three very different reasons. And I'm not going to give too much away, because what Natalie Jenner does in this book is she allows us to learn and become so intimate with these characters that I feel like if I tell you too much about them, I'm going to take away a bit of the joy of the reading experience. What I will say, some of the characters that we met in the Jane Austen Society do come back in this book. So if you haven't read that one, why not read them both? Totally support that. But this one's about bookstores. This is about books. This is about literature. It's about the love of literature. Many different famous writers appear in this book, and it's done just in such a charming, lovely way. And it's just a lot of fun. And in the end, it's very rewarding. So Bloomsbury Girls by Natalie Jenner. This is out by St. Martin Press here in the US. Highly, highly recommend both of those books. Okay, so you all know that I read the entire long list for the National Book Award and the Booker this year, mind you. So that's pretty impressive for me if you think about it. And I read them back to back almost. And I had my favorites on the lists, and not all of my favorites made the short list. But one book that I couldn't get out of my head when I read it, and I was so sad didn't make the short list, was Maria by Marytza K. Rubio. You know what? With the spacing, I thought the K was part of the first name, and I was making that way more complicated on myself. Marytza K. Rubio. This is out from Liverlight book. This is a collection of short stories. They deal with, I don't know how to explain it, but they deal with Mexican-American culture, but they also have like this sort of fantasy, fable, play with spirits and ghosts and all of this kind of stuff. If I'm describing this book, I'd say it's a cross between like Borges and Kelly Link. Does that make sense? I loved them. I loved every story. I turned the pages. I thought, my problem usually with short story collections is that I'll just start to get invested and a story will be over. I felt all of these were complete moments in time, and I absolutely adored every single one of them. And I think the cover is something fierce, if I'm being honest with you. And I was devastated that this did not make the short list. And Marytza is her style. Woo. And I cannot wait to see what happens next. So this is Maria and Other Stories by Marytza K. Rubio, out from Liverlight. Okay, last but not least is a book that I read in the last couple of months. And I absolutely, I love a book that reimagines the life of an author. And that's Hester by Laurie, Lico, Albanese. And this is also out from St. Martin's Press. And this is a reimagination of the creation of Hester Prynne from The Scarlet Letter. And in this book, we have a young woman who she and her husband move in the early 1800s, I believe from Scotland. I don't know if it's Edinburgh, but from Scotland to the US because her husband becomes indebted, becomes and they're sort of forced to flee, really. And they get to America, and her husband just disappears. And she has to sort of make a life for her own. And the way she does that is through her needlework. And she meets Nathaniel Hawthorne, and they start in this sort of relationship of this coy sort of we like each other, and it goes where it goes. And you sort of see how Laurie intertwines the idea of it becoming the inspiration for the Scarlet Letter. It's so good. You just will turn all of the pages. You'll want to know how and what she's going to do. She mixes in American history, literary history, but she really just talks about the life. And I think her name is Isabel, right? Yes, Isabel. She just makes her a character that you are rooting for to find some form of happiness. And it's so good. So that's Hester by Laurie Lico Albanese, and this is out from St. Martin's Press. Okay, well, that's a good little stack of books, don't you think? I hope. Let me see if I can get these all up here. I hope that every single one of these will make it onto your TBR. Please read these books. I just don't know that enough people were talking about them or reading them last year. So let's make 2023 the year that we're all talking about them and reading about them. As always, I could not do this without y'all, so thank you so very, very much. If you are a return subscriber, you know I appreciate you more than anything. If you're new to my channel, I hope that you click subscribe, click the button. It always helps me out in the end. As always, I encourage you to read globally, shop locally, and until next time, I wish you happy reading, everyone. Bye.